The blood on the floor didn't belong to a human, and that's why Elara knew she was going to die today. She scrubbed the black marble until her knuckles bled, yet the red stain just wouldn't fade. Every time she pushed the brush, a sharp pain shot through her shoulder because the mark on her skin was waking up. Truth be told, she was a ghost in this palace. She was a maid. She was a secret. She was a target. Her body moved on instinct as she tried to hide the silver-black symbol under her rough tunic. What followed was a low, heavy thud that rattled the windows. The great doors were opening. Elara's heart skipped because the air in the hall suddenly changed. It didn't just get colder, it felt hungry. Moments later, the scent hit her. It was a mix of crushed pine needles and a coming thunderstorm. This was the smell of the Lycan King. She stayed on her knees because she was too afraid to look up. Even so, the mark on her shoulder began to glow with a terrifying white-hot heat. Deep down, she knew the truth. This mark wasn't a gift from the moon goddess. It was a demon. It was a parasite that had been eating her soul for 21 years. Before she could move, the sound of heavy boots echoed against the stone. With every step he took, the floor seemed to tremble under his power. Elara squeezed her eyes shut. Maybe it was fate that she was the one cleaning this specific spot today. In that moment, a shadow fell over her. It was massive and dark, swallowing the little bit of light she had left. As the silence roared, she realized the king had stopped right in front of her. The space between them burned. She could feel the heat radiating off his body like a furnace. Without thinking, she gripped her scrubbing brush until her fingers turned white. What's worse, the mark on her shoulder started to pulse in time with the king's heartbeat. It was a rhythmic, agonizing throb that made her want to scream. As if pulled by a string, her head tilted up. The moment their eyes locked, Elara's world tilted. King Alaric didn't look like a man. He looked like a storm held together by skin and muscle. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, cold, piercing, and full of ancient secrets. In that moment, she forgot how to breathe. She was just a maid with a bucket, but he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the room. As if fate demanded it, he reached out a hand. Elara flinched. Because of that, she scrambled backward, knocking over her bucket of lye water. The soapy mess splashed across the king's boots. She didn't know what scared her more, his anger or the way her bones remembered him. The tension broke when a guard stepped forward, but Alaric held up a hand. As the silence stretched, he leaned down. His voice was a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in Elara's chest. "You," he whispered. Between one breath and the next, Elara realized he wasn't looking at her face. He was staring at her shoulder, right where the mark was burning through her clothes. She felt it, etched in fire. Soon after, she ducked into the dark servants' tunnel, her lungs burning with every breath. Next, she hit the scullery doors, bursting into the damp heat of the kitchens. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop her hands from shaking. As if summoned, the memories of her nightmares started to bleed into her vision. She saw fire. She saw teeth. She saw a woman dying while a man howled in the distance. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. Elara leaned against a cold stone wall because her legs wouldn't hold her up anymore. Truth be told, she was terrified that the king had seen the mark. What followed was a wave of nausea that made her head spin. She reached up to touch her shoulder. The fabric of her tunic was scorched. The mark had burned right through the wool. Because of that, she knew she couldn't hide it anymore. She was a marked woman in a den of wolves, Meanwhile, the other maids were whispering in the corners. They looked at her with pity and fear. She didn't blame them. Still, Elara didn't have time to worry about gossip. But then, the kitchen doors flew open again. Without warning, the head cook grabbed her arm. "The king wants you," the woman hissed. As the truth unraveled, Elara felt like she was drowning. Why did his scent make her wolf stir? In the span of a breath, she realized her life was over. Instead, there was only a sacrificial lamb walking toward the lion's den. Before either could speak, she reached the king's heavy oak doors. They were carved with the images of howling wolves. That's why she hesitated. But then, the doors swung open on their own. The space between them burned as Elara stepped into the king's bedroom. It smelled like a wild forest. Alaric was standing by the window, his back to her. Still, he didn't turn around right away. He let the silence roar between them until Elara thought she would faint. "Show me," he said. His voice was like velvet over gravel. Elara's breath caught because she knew exactly what he meant. Without thinking, she clutched the collar of her tunic. What followed was a movement so fast her eyes couldn't track it. In the span of a breath, Alaric was right in front of her. Time stood still. His hand came up, but he didn't hit her. He used one finger to hook the collar of her shirt. Beneath the moonlight, his skin looked like marble. As the bond pulsed, he pulled the fabric aside just enough to see the mark. As her wolf stirred, Elara felt a jolt of electricity shoot through her entire body. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. She saw a flash of a different room. She saw Alaric, but he was younger. He was smiling. A beat later, she was back in the present. "It's you," Alaric whispered. "I've waited 300 years for this mark to appear again." What's worse, he looked devastated. Elara felt her chest ache because the pain in his eyes was too much to bear. Yet, she didn't understand. She was just a maid. She wasn't a queen. "I'm not her," she choked out. Without another word, Alaric leaned in. He pressed his forehead against hers. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she felt her internal walls crumbling. The air thickened with the scent of his desire. Between them, something cracked. As the silence roared, Alaric's hand slid to the back of her neck. Still, there was a shadow in the corner of the room. Elara saw it out of the corner of her eye. It was a dark, swirling mist that didn't belong in the light. Before the words left her lips, the window shattered. A growl rose in her throat, not from her, but from the mark itself. The shadows danced between them, taking the shape of a man with eyes like void. What followed was a cold, cruel laugh. "You found her, Alaric," the shadow hissed, "which means I can finally kill her for the last time." Before she could move, the king shifted. It wasn't a slow change. It was an explosion of fur and muscle. As if pulling a string, his body grew and warped until a massive obsidian wolf stood where the man had been. He lunged, a blur of fury and teeth. Elara watched in horror as the wolf and the shadow collided. Her world tilted because she realized the monster from her nightmares was finally standing in front of her. And she let it happen. Without warning, the obsidian beast slammed into the shadow man. The sound was like two mountains grinding together because the magic was thick and heavy. Next, Elara scrambled into the corner, her hands clawing at the stone. After that, she watched as the shadow man's fingers turned into long, black needles. What followed was a spray of silver blood that hit the wall. In that moment, she saw the shadow man's face clearly. He had swirling pits of purple smoke for eyes. Because of that, Elara felt a coldness in her soul. Soon after, the king let out a roar that shattered the glass. Still, the shadow man just laughed. Before she could move, the shadow man pointed a finger at her. As if pulled by a string, Elara felt her body lift off the ground. Her breath caught because an invisible hand was squeezing her neck. What followed was a flash of white light. She saw the forest from her dreams. She saw the same shadow man standing over her with a jagged stone knife. Not only that, she felt the phantom pain of a blade in her heart. Deep down, she knew the truth. This had happened before. She had died 12 times, and each time, the shadow man was the one who took her breath. Moments later, the king lunged again. He didn't care about his own safety. Between one breath and the next, the pressure on Elara's neck vanished. She hit the floor hard. Yet, she didn't stay down. Rather, she watched as the shadow man began to dissolve. "This is just the beginning," the shadow hissed. Soon after, the ink seeped into the floorboards. The king didn't shift back right away. Instead, he stood over Elara, his wolf chest heaving. As the silence roared, he lowered his head and licked a drop of blood from her cheek. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. Elara didn't feel like a maid anymore. But then, she saw the wound on his side. It was bleeding black smoke. By the time they reached the tunnels, the king's steps were heavy. He had shifted back, but he was pale. Next, he leaned against the stone wall. Elara wanted to help him, yet she didn't know if she should touch him. "Why did he say he killed me before?" she whispered. Alaric looked at her with winter blue eyes. "Because he did, Elara. Every time the moon sends you back, Valerius finds a way to take you away." Soon after, he slid down the wall. What followed was a moment of pure vulnerability. Still, he reached out and took her hand. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she saw her own past lives. "I am a curse to you," she realized. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop the tears. But then, Alaric pulled her closer. As if summoned, her body moved on instinct. As the bond pulsed, she placed her hand over his wound. What followed was a glow that filled the tunnel. The black smoke began to vanish. Elara's voice trembled because she didn't know she could do that. In that moment, she realized she had a power of her own. Come morning, the palace was in panic. From the window, she saw smoke rising. What followed was a line of gray, twisted beasts, the Forsaken. "He's coming for the mark," Alaric said. He looked like a god of war again. Still, Elara could see the worry. He wanted to hide her. Truth be told, that's what he had done 12 times before, and every time, it had failed. "I'm not going to hide," she said. Before either could speak, the first of the Forsaken hit the walls. As the sky darkened, Elara felt a growl rising in her own throat. As if fate demanded it, she felt her bones start to itch. What's worse, she could feel Valerius nearby. Rather than letting the fear take her, she pushed back. Without another word, Alaric turned to her. The moment their eyes locked, he saw the fire. "Then we fight together," he growled. As if the forest watched, the doors burst open. Before she could move, Alaric shifted. In a single heartbeat, the obsidian wolf was back. Next, Elara didn't run. Instead, she stepped forward. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she reached out for the power in her blood. With every step he took toward the monsters, she was right beside him. As the bond pulsed, she felt his strength. The space between them burned with a white-hot light. She felt the world narrow down to this moment. She saw the monsters. She saw the blood. She saw her chance. And she let it happen. The scent of iron and wet fur hung heavy as Alaric led Elara into the royal wing. After that, he ushered her into a place where the walls were gold. Truth be told, she felt like a stain on the silk. She stood by the door because she was waiting for a mistake. What followed was a moment of heavy silence as Alaric closed the doors. He looked at her with tenderness. "You belong here, Elara," he said. Next, he walked toward a silver mirror. She looked like a stranger because the mark on her shoulder was now a pulsing gold. Because of that, the shadows seemed to shrink away. "Why was I scrubbing floors?" she asked. As if pulled by a string, Alaric turned her around. "I had to be sure, Elara. Not only that, I had to protect you." Still, she felt a prickle of anger. Before she could move, Alaric pulled a small silver box from beneath the bed. "This is yours," he whispered. "It's the only thing left from the first time you lived." She didn't open it yet because the air thickened with a dark chill. Come morning, the Grand Matriarch entered the room. What followed was a sharp gasp. "The 13th life," the matriarch whispered. Meanwhile, Elara's heart skipped. "What cycle?" she asked. The matriarch looked at Alaric. "You are the key to his immortality, child. In fact, every time you die, he stays young. He lives on your deaths." No matter how hard she tried, Elara couldn't breathe. She looked at Alaric, wanting him to deny it. Yet, he only looked at the floor. "Is it true?" she choked out. Alaric stepped forward. "I would have died 1,000 times to save you once." She didn't believe him because the pain in her shoulder was screaming. Without thinking, she ran into the gardens. In the span of a breath, she was out in the maze. Deep down, she knew the truth. The palace wasn't a sanctuary. Before she could move, the wind shifted. It smelled like rot. Without warning, a shadow wolf leaped over the hedge. As if summoned, her body moved on instinct. Without thinking, she reached for a heavy stone statue. Her instincts surged. As the silence stretched, the shadow wolf lunged. Because of that, she swung the stone. The moment their eyes locked, the shadow wolf froze. Between one breath and the next, Elara realized it was a piece of her own soul that Valerius had stolen. "Come back," she whispered. As if fate demanded it, the beast dissolved into gold dust. It flowed into her skin. The mark on her shoulder didn't just burn, it sang. The space between them burned with a light so bright. With every heartbeat, she felt her strength returning. She wasn't a Null. She was a weapon. Soon after, Alaric burst into the garden. Under the weight of his stare, she felt her fear turning into resolve. "The ritual of the silver moon is in 3 days," she said. "That is when we end this." As the sky darkened, Alaric bowed his head. He bowed to his queen, and she let it happen. The moon was a cold witness to the way Alaric's claws tore into the earth. After that, he led her to the ancient den. Truth be told, she felt like a girl in a costume. Next, Alaric shifted back, his skin glistening. "You have to find the wolf inside, Elara," he said. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't feel anything but fear. Because of that, she let out a cry. What followed was a heavy silence. Soon after, Alaric walked over. "I can't do it," she whispered. In that moment, Alaric pulled her against his chest. As if pulled by a string, she leaned into him. Even so, the mark remained cold. To make things worse, a low howl echoed from outside. Moments later, the torches flickered and died. Before she could move, A freezing wind whipped through the den. What followed was the midpoint shift. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. She saw herself dying over and over. She saw Alaric drinking her life force. "He needs you to die," Valerius's voice hissed. As the truth unraveled, Elara felt a scream build. Deep down, she knew the truth was complicated, but the pain was too real. Because of that, she felt a burst of white-hot rage. As her wolf stirred, the cave exploded in light. While her pulse raced, Elara pushed Alaric away. "You let me die 12 times!" she choked out. Without another word, Alaric reached for her. But then, the ground shook. As if summoned, the ceiling began to crack. Between one breath and the next, a massive beast burst through the stone. Before either could speak, the beast lunged. Without thinking, Alaric threw himself in the way. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Elara watched as the claws tore his throat. Her breath caught. Time stood still. In that moment, something inside her shifted. As the silence roared, Elara felt her ribs expand. Her teeth grew sharp. As if fate demanded it, she finally shifted. She was a golden creature of light. Beneath the moonlight, she let out a howl. More importantly, she was done being the sacrifice. She lunged at the beast. What followed was a spray of black blood. In the span of a breath, the monster was dead. Yet Alaric was still down. She shifted back and knelt beside him. "I'll break the cycle," she whispered. "We die together, or we live together." As the mark tingled, she pressed her hand to his wound. She felt the heat, she felt the hope, and she let it happen. The golden fur had barely vanished when Elara realized she was the heartbeat of a king. After that, she pressed her glowing hands to his neck. Truth be told, she helped him because she loved him. In that moment, her mark burned like a sun. Next, she felt his skin knit together. Not only that, she felt his life force rushing into her. Moments later, Alaric's eyes snapped open. "You shifted," he rasped. "You are the first golden wolf in 300 years. Before either could speak, Elara stood up and grabbed the silver box. Because of that, she clutched it to her chest. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she felt a new resolve. "We are going to the temple," she said. "I am tired of being your sacrifice." Alaric stayed quiet because the shame was a heavy cloak. Even so, he stood up. What followed was a look of pure devotion. "Then we go," he growled. Come morning, the forest felt like it was holding its breath. While the forest held its breath, Elara felt the silver box humming. Soon after, they stopped by a stream. "Tell me a story," Elara said. Alaric sat on a fallen log. Under the weight of his stare, he told her about a star catcher. "I'm not a star, Alaric," she whispered. "I'm a wolf." What followed was a sudden shift in the wind. Not only that, but the trees leaned toward them. Without warning, the Grand Matriarch stepped out. "The temple is guarded," she said. Elara looked at the silver box, which meant the box was the key Valerius needed. Still, she didn't drop it. Without another word, she looked at Alaric. "We don't go to the temple as prey," she decided. "We go as hunters." By the time they reached the mountain, the sky was the color of a bruise. Beneath the moonlight, the temple looked like a tooth. "Wait," Alaric said. Before she could move, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a burning claim. "If we don't make it out," Alaric murmured, "know that I loved every version of you." Her breath caught. Even so, she pulled back. "We are making it out," she promised. Without thinking, she turned toward the doors. What followed was a roar of black smoke. Valerius stood there with a stone knife. "The box, Elara," he hissed. As the bond pulsed, Elara looked at Alaric. She saw the trick. The shadow man was looking at her heart. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. She was the lock, and the box was the key. As her wolf stirred, she felt her bones start to crack. She didn't wait. She felt it, etched in fire, that the point of no return had passed. And she let it happen. The silver box didn't just fall, it shattered. And that's why Elara knew their hope was a lie. Before she could move, the black mist inside exploded. Instead of a weapon, it was a trap. Next, the shadows wrapped around Alaric's neck. He let out a choked sound. What followed was a wave of purple fire that knocked Elara backward. Truth be told, she felt her soul cracking as she watched Alaric's fur turn to gray ash. In that moment, Valerius stepped over the broken pieces. Soon after, the ground beneath Alaric split open. As a result, the king was pulled down. "Because of that, you've handed me his life," Valerius hissed. What followed was the long descent. After that, they threw her into a pit of ancient rot. She hit the ground hard. Soon after, the torches revealed the truth. She saw the bones of the 12 women who came before her. She felt weak because her light had gone out. She felt small. "Is that all I am?" she wondered. Next, she saw a name carved into the wall, Arya. Deep down, she knew the truth. The trap had been set long ago. What's worse, she could hear Alaric screaming above. As the silence roared, Elara sat in the pile of her own past lives. Before the words left her lips, she felt the mark go cold. She felt alone. In the span of a breath, she felt her walls collapse. Without thinking, she touched the skull of Arya. In that moment, the shadows danced. "What would you have done?" she whispered. As the sky darkened, Elara felt her hope wither. She couldn't move because her heart was broken. To make things worse, Valerius's voice echoed down the hall. "The ritual begins at midnight." As if fate demanded it, she lay down in the dust. Her voice trembled as she closed her eyes. While the forest held its breath, Elara let the darkness take her. And she let it happen. The bone of my finger didn't just snap, it sang. In the quiet that followed, Elara stared at the fragment. It was a map. After that, she felt a cold heat rising. Truth be told, she was done waiting. Because of that, she pressed her forehead against the skull of Arya. Next, a memory flooded her mind. She saw a light that didn't have a sun. She saw Alaric when he was just a boy. What followed was a whisper from the bones. "The mark is the key." At that moment, Elara realized she was the source. The mark exploded into gold light. As if pulled by a string, Elara stood up. Her body moved on instinct as she climbed the bone-slicked walls. Without thinking, she jammed her fingers into the stone. Soon after, she reached the top. The air thickened with rot. Before she could move, she heard a drum. Valerius was at the altar. To make things worse, she saw Alaric's body stretched out. Even so, Elara didn't scream. "I am the girl who ruled," she whispered. What followed was a shift in the wind. Moments later, Elara saw her chance. Valerius raised the knife. Because of that, Elara didn't wait. She let her wolf press forward. Without warning, she leaped from the shadows. The space between them burned. In the span of a breath, she hit Valerius like a falling star. As the silence roared, the sorcerer shrieked. Yet, Elara didn't stop. "You won't kill me today!" she roared. Between one breath and the next, she felt Alaric's heart beat again. Truth be told, she saw the fear in the sorcerer's eyes. Before the words left her lips, Alaric let out a growl. He was shifting. With every heartbeat, the light grew brighter. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Elara felt her bones remember. She only needed the man who held her soul. As if fate demanded it, the mark sent gold light into Alaric's chest. The tension broke. While her pulse raced, Elara stood over the sorcerer. And she let it happen. The final scream came from the air itself, and that's why the shadows bled. Before she could move, Valerius raised the knife for the last time. Next, Elara felt her bones pop and snap. What followed was an explosion of golden light. Truth be told, she was the white fire wolf. As if fate demanded it, her body grew until she was as big as Alaric. Not only that, her eyes were twin suns. Beside her, Alaric let out a roar. Soon after, the obsidian wolf and the golden wolf moved as one. Because of that, the air smelled like ozone. Without thinking, Elara lunged. What's worse, she could feel his magic trying to drain her, but her light was too hot. In that moment, she was the hunter. Even so, Valerius struck with his blade. But then, Alaric's jaws snapped shut on the sorcerer's throat. As the silence roared, Elara didn't hesitate. She let all her power flow out. She burned every death and every shadow. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. Valerius turned into white ash. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the golden light expanded. The cycle was broken. Moments later, the temple crumbled. By the time the dust settled, the sky was the color of a peach. Soon after, she saw Alaric. He was human, but he had silver at his temples. Truth be told, he was mortal. "The curse is gone," he whispered. Next, he pulled her into his arms. Because of that, Elara started to cry. What followed was a long walk back. They found the Grand Matriarch waiting. As the bond pulsed, she felt Alaric's thoughts. He was thinking about a garden. Not only that, she leaned her head against his shoulder. The mark was just a silver scar. Come morning, the great hall looked different. It smelled like lilies. Elara stood in a gown of gold silk. That's why she paused at the spot where her blood had hit the marble. In the quiet that followed, she realized the stain was gone. Next, Alaric stepped out. He took her hand. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she felt the eyes of the pack. "What are you thinking?" Alaric murmured. She smiled. "I was thinking about how much I used to hate these floors," she whispered. Between them, something cracked. It was the last of her old self falling away. As the sky darkened, they sat on their thrones. The air thickened with the scent of their love. Without thinking, she looked out at the halls. Her world tilted because she was finally home. Deep down, she knew the truth. "I was never scrubbing floors," she whispered. "I was polishing the path to my own throne." And she let it happen.